Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm Harpreet Singh here with a daily analysis of The Hindu from 3rd of October 2024. Though we did not have the newspaper today because yesterday was a national holiday, but still we have taken some articles for discussion and let's see what are the various dimensions associated with those articles. Let's begin. Again, this is a QR code where you can get all the written stuff that I'm writing on the board. Along with it, various other articles would be posted here which will be beneficial for you for your preparation. Let's begin with the articles that we have taken for today's consideration. First is ecologically sensitive areas, second is small nuclear reactors, and third's the BRICS as a topic. These three are very important topic. Let's see and analyze them. First, now very important article over here. This is very important from the perspective of your preliminary examination as well as your mains examination. We're going to understand what do you mean by ecologically sensitive areas, and there are various committees that have recommended various suggestions, and implementation of those basically suggestions are being opposed by certain states. Like the state of Karnataka has basically opposed the implementation with respect to the ecologically sensitive zones, how it is going to hinder their development activities, what are the dimensions we're going to study in this particular article. Let's see. See, we very well know the Western Ghat region. Now, before we specifically deal with the dimension of Western Ghat, we need to understand what ecologically sensitive areas basically are. First understand them, and then we will deal with the topic that is concerning them regarding the Western Ghats ecologically sensitive areas. Let's begin. See, when we talk about the ecologically sensitive areas, we need to understand that ecologically sensitive areas are located within 10 kilometers around the protected areas, national parks, and the wildlife sanctuaries. It is like a transition zone for the areas which have less protection to the areas which have high protection. Now, what does this mean? Please understand. Let's see a diagram over here in order to understand. Let us see, this is a national park. Now, this is it's a protected area. Now you realize that, let us say this particular area is not that protected. Let us say habitation is there. So what is this ecologically sensitive areas? Let us say approximately 10 kilometers around this particular national park, or let us say wildlife sanctuary. You have ecologically sensitive areas. What does this basically denote? It basically acts like a transition zone. This is a transition zone from where a lot of protection is there, restrictions are there, and other areas where such protections are not there. So this is a transition zone which is being mentioned over here. That is why over here we have said ESAs are located within 10 kilometers around the protected areas, national parks, and wildlife sanctuaries. It is like a transition zone between the regions which have less protection with respect to the regions which have more protection, and this is a transition zone. Clear? Now this is again very important for you to understand from the perspective of logical and analysis. Let's see. These are notified under the Environment Protection Act 1986. This is very, very important, and by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. See, this concept was basically established in 2002. The ecologically sensitive zones or areas act as the buffer zone. Buffer between what? Between the areas which have high protection and the areas which have less protection. This is a buffer zone or a transition zone. Now, providing an additional layer of wildlife protection by serving as a shock observer. Shock observer because, see, what generally happens is, supposing this ecologically sensitive area is not present, and let us say this yellow line denotes a national park. So what will happen if supposingly this buffer zone is not there? That means other activities would be allowed over here outside the national park. Now there is a greater chance of people encroaching and disturbing the wildlife sanctuary over here. Than better would be to have a buffer zone which basically restrains that. This is ecologically sensitive. If certain impact, let us say, is happening also, it will be happening in these areas, not in the protected area itself. So this is like a transition zone, a warning for the people also that no, there is a protected area after that, so you have to be very careful. So that is why this acts as a shock observer. Clear? Now coming back to the aspect of the Western Ghats. Please remember, now Western Ghat has its own ecology and environmental condition which is very sensitive. Again, that is why various efforts have been made that we need to declare the ecological or ecological sensitive zones and areas over here. So for that, there were various committees formed. The first committee that was formed was Madhav Gadgil committee. Now what happened is that, let me give you a brief. Gadgil committee basically overemphasized on the concept that a lot of protection needs to be given with respect to the ecologically sensitive areas or the zones. And what happened is there was opposition from the government itself and the various state governments also. Why? If ecologically sensitive areas are more emphasized, what will happen? They also will have certain restrictions of certain activities that would be carried out in those regions. So the various states were saying that we have certain mining activities, we have some commercial projects going on. If you declare everything as ecologically sensitive, then you are basically stigmatizing the developmental activities that are taking place around the protected areas also. So what happened? This committee, though formed, was in a way rejected also. In order to go on with the concept of protection of the Western Ghats, we see another committee was formed that is known as Dr. Kasturi Rangan committee. Now, this committee recommended also certain ideals. We're going to read both of them, don't worry. They also recommended certain dimensions which were basically accepted by the government. Now, what happens? Why this news is also there is, when this committee's recommendations have been accepted, state of Karnataka is still opposing that. It says that we are not going to accept it, the imposition of ecologically sensitive areas in our state, because it is going to go against the developmental activities that are going around the region of Western Ghats. Because of the imposition of the ecologically sensitive area zones will basically stigmatize the development. Now, important for us is to understand the recommendations of the committee and then analyze and see both of them. Let's see. We have all understood what is the concept of ecologically sensitive areas. Now, in order to have such areas in Western Ghats, protection measures have been done. So committee was formed. That is first is Madhav Gadgil committee. Now, classifications of ecologically sensitive zones. 64% of the Western Ghats spread over 6 states and categorized as ESZ 1, 2 and 3. So there were classification that were made by Madhav Gadgil committee, and 64% of the Western Ghats were under the ESZ. Recommended to declare the entire Western Ghats as ecologically sensitive. That means once you declare it ecologically sensitive, then various restrictions are basically imposed, right? Halting all developmental activities like mining, construction, dams and all were recommended by the Madhav Gadgil committee, because they said if you carry on with the aspects of mining and dam building and all, what will happen? It is going to destroy the ecology of the Western Ghats and destroy its flora and fauna, so stop them. This was again something that went against the ideology of the various states who believed in commercialization of these areas for their economic gain. Now what happened? Ban on single commercial crop. That means plantation or cropping, single cropping was again banned. This was recommended actually. Like, next is bottom to top government. Bottom to top governance, that means local level initiative, let us say, opinion would be taken at the local level, let us say the Gram Sabha level and all, and so on, the recommendation should go up. So that means inclusive governance concept comes into being, in which people at the local level are also a part of the decision-making process. So this was recommended by Madhav Gadgil committee. Now, because of its strictness with respect to the recommendations that were made, that basically pointed out at declaring it completely the Western Ghats as ecologically sensitive areas, along with it recommending the ban on, let us say, dams and all. Now, this was again opposed by the various state governments. They said, no, this should not be imposed. So because of that, what happened? Then another committee was formed by the Union Ministry, which was Dr. K. Kasturi Rajan committee. Now what it did was it reduced the ecologically sensitive area to only 37% of the Western Ghats. That means earlier what was complete Western Ghats should be declared as ecologically sensitive area, but Kasturi Rangan committee basically reduced it to only the 37%. Now what is he doing? Categorization divided into 2 broad categories. The broad categories are first the cultural areas where human settlement would be allowed. Other is natural regions where non-human settlements, that means the human settlement will not be allowed. So they are basically dividing the concept of the ESA into 2 categories, where human settlement can be allowed and others where it cannot be allowed, right? So that is why we realize that the percentage of ESA has been reduced with respect to the Western Ghats. Now, as we move ahead, we realize that categorization on the basis of the activities was done by Kasturi Rangan committee. What it does it? First is a red category. red category, activities such as mining, stone quarrying were recommended to be banned, in certain areas. Orange, activities would be regulated and allowed with appropriate permission. Those were the orange zones. And the green zones were all agricultural, horticulture, and certain commercial activities were allowed. Now, this committee basically diluted the recommendations of the Madhav Gadgil committee because it introduced the concept of human settlement, habitation, and activities within the ESA. Now, even implementation of the Kasturi Rangan committee is being opposed by the states because they say that you are basically imposing ecology and giving preference to the ecology and environment over at any development activity that is taking place around the Western Ghats. So that is why we need to know these committees and the aspects associated with this. So this is something that you should be aware of. Now let us move ahead. There is another concept that has come up, is small nuclear reactor. You would have seen that 2 days back I had taken up the editorial, which was basically nuclear power and the private sector. We realized that the budget 24-25 basically coined or stated that the private participation with respect to small nuclear reactors or nuclear power plant or energy generation, private participation can be seen. So with that, we also in the editorial analysis seen that Atomic Energy Act basically prohibits the participation of the private players per se, and it is the sole responsibility of the central government to produce and disseminate, let us say, the energy that is produced and also the waste that is produced. Now, with that respect, we realize that there have been the concept of small nuclear reactors that have been come. Now, why it is very important? See, generally when we see the major reactors which are there is large or conventional reactors. These are producing 700 megawatts of electricity. Then there are small modular reactors. We have up to 300 megawatts. And then we have the micro reactors that are approximately producing approximately 10 megawatts. So what we are basically talking about is various governments across the world are coming up with these reactors which are smaller in size, more portable. These are so small that they can be even put on, let us say, a large truck and get transported from one place to another. So that means lesser amount of waste would be produced. Local level demand for energy can be met. Along with it, obviously, the various targets which have been taken up by the various countries with respect to the climatic targets. So that can also be fulfilled. So various positives have been there. So with this respect, we realize that there has been an emphasis on the smaller nuclear reactors because they are seen as a measure through which the energy demand that is rising across the countries can be met. Now, with that respect, let us see the various dimensions that are associated with that. Now comes the concept of small modular reactors. Now, what are these concepts? Let's see. These are small nuclear reactors that offer a power output of 30 to 300 megawatt electric. This is the power output. Now, these are not very huge, smaller size, right? Now, they harness nuclear fission to generate heat to produce energy. Small nuclear reactors have the potential to provide a reliable and low carbon source of electricity, complementing the renewable energy resources. So that means basically the emphasis on the portability of these reactors, which are not as huge. Obviously, the cost is going to be less and local level demands can be met because they can be easily moved from one place to another. Now, what are the key features of these reactors? Small in size, first of all. Modular design, can be factory assembled and transported to the sites because they are small size. So they can be placed on a truck and transported from one place to another. Next is reduced land requirement, because earlier you would have seen that in order to have a nuclear power plant, you used to have a large acquisition of land, along with the protection measures one had to take place, and various aspects had to be dealt with respect to the land because of the radiation, all large spaces. It is generally appears that the size of the reactor is small, but the large space or land had to be acquired. So that issue is also resolved. Reduced reliance on the critical minerals. So because we will be realizing that these reactors require lesser amount of minerals and easy power throughput is there. So better energy generation is there. So obviously the dependence will decrease. Now, as we move ahead, we realize what are the benefits. we see that reduced construction time and cost, enhanced safety, increased flexibility, and reduced environmental impact, obviously directly and indirectly. Directly through, let us say, acquisition of land is less, so automatically the land which was, let us say, an agriculture land, lesser impact on that. On the other hand, indirectly also through the radiation impact would be less because the size of the reactors are small. Okay, let's move ahead. The next topic is with respect to the BRICS. We know that the BRICS summit has to take place in 2024, October 22nd to 24th. Now, we have to understand that when the summit will take place this month, we will be discussing the outputs that will come. Right now, again, what is important for us, because this was in news, we need to understand what is BRICS and small or little aspects with respect to BRICS. Because when we know this, when the summit takes place, all the output that will come, or the, let us say, what are the discussions that take place, multilateral discussions that take place, what is India's view on the various topics, when that comes, we will be discussing that also with, let us say, special emphasis on the editorials that come on the BRICS. But over here, we have to understand what basically BRICS is. Let's see. BRICS is a acronym for the grouping of the world leading emerging countries. It is basically, this full form is representing the names of the countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So initials of these countries basically represent the BRICS. Now please understand, earlier it was not BRICS, it was basically BRIC, BRIC. Later South Africa joined, so we realized that obviously the name changed. Let us see that. This was basically coined by the economist Jim O'Neill in 2001. An economist basically coined this word, that there is a huge potential among the BRIC countries in order to be, let us say, the leading economic powers in the future. So that means this word was coined by an economist to represent the four rapidly growing economies of Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So this was coined, again you need to remember, coined by Jim O'Neill in 2001. This again becomes important for your preliminary examination. As we move ahead, we'll be realizing that origin. The first BRICS summit, remember, South Africa has not yet joined, so it will only be BRIC, not BRICS, right? The first BRICS summit was held in Yekaterinburg in Russia on 16th June 2009. Please remember, such types of questions have already come in the examination. Like if they ask a question about BRICS, they can ask you where was the first summit held in one of the statements, if 3-4 statements are there. That is why whenever any organization's name comes in the newspaper, we generally pick it up and discuss with you. So please remember, when you are noting it down also, leave some one-page gap, because whatever the outcome would be from this summit, which is going to take place in October, we're going to discuss that also. Clear? So first summit was held in Russia in June 2009. Now expansion. South Africa joined in 2010. With the entry of South Africa, the word BRIC was changed to BRICS, because S is South Africa. Now, other countries have also joined the BRICS. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE have joined from 1st January 2024, because it was an outcome of the 2023 meet that it was decided that from 1st January 2024, these are also going to be the members of the BRICS countries. That means 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 countries have joined. 1 joined in 2010. Earlier, 4 countries were already there as the founding members. Clear? Now, this is something that you should be aware of. Now, please understand. BRICS Summit 2024 is again going to take place. This is very important. We are doing the basic dimensions. Other outcome, what would we will be discussing then. It will be hosted by Russia in Kazan from October 22nd to 24, 2024. What is the agenda? To promote partnership and cooperation within the framework of association of the 3 key areas. What are those 3 key areas? Politics and security, economy and finance, cultural and humanities ties. So these are the areas which are broadly discussed, would be discussed, and under each of these we will be having various declarations taking place, various decisions being made, and all those things we are going to observe when we will be basically doing this. So this is again very, very important with respect to your civil services examination. Now, why BRICS is important, please understand. You need to understand the benefit also. See, it represents 41% of the global population. Just imagine, these countries represent 41% of the global population. So the impact that they can have across the world is also something very huge. $25.85 trillion GDP is being represented by these countries combined. 24% of the world's total economic output and 29% of the planet's land resources are being represented. This is again a major impact. But this organization is a representation of all these things itself create a huge impact with the global dimension and global geopolitics. Second is global South-South cooperation. We all know South-South cooperation basically refers to the cooperation among the developing countries. Now, all these are developing countries who are ambitious enough to, let us say, make their mark at the global sphere with respect to in the future. Like, for example, India is targeting to become a developed country by 2047. Obviously, there are other countries also aspiring to be developed. So that means presently the developing countries association is being represented or manifested through the BRICS as a organization or as a group. So this again basically boosts their stand with respect to the rights of the developing countries. As we move ahead, international cooperation on various platforms, because these countries also are present in, let us say, United Nations and various other organizations. So when there is a consensus among these developing countries, that basically is carried forward to the other platforms, let us say United Nations also. Next, alternative financing assistance, because you have the new development bank that was formed under the aegis of the BRICS. Now, this also provides developmental assistance. So this again is a alternative finance mechanism that is there for the countries who are present over here. Now, this was the important aspect of the discussion from today's newspaper analysis. I hope you liked the analysis, you learned something new from this. It is important that when you are seeing these news articles and papers, if you are possibly noting it down, always have different registers or copies for different papers, GS1, GS2, and GS3 and GS4. And whatever articles that come, you can basically, if you want, you can write based on your aspect or way of studying. So this was the analysis from today's The Hindu from the 3rd of October 2024. We'll be continuing with the analysis tomorrow also. Take care, Jai Hind, and God bless.